Good evening, everyone. My name is Kate. When my mother discovered my true identity, I knew the jig was up, which is truly unfortunate because she was just about to reveal which of her 6 children was secretly her favorite. I was pretty sure it was me. I'm the youngest of 7 and the accident in the family, or as my mother vastly prefers me to say, surprise! My mother had me when she was in her 40s. She claims she didn't know she could still get pregnant. Oops. Here I am. But there's also a 10-year gap between me and my sister Janice, who used to be the youngest until I was born. Janice, by the way, has only recently forgiven me for usurping her position as last in the family birth order. All of my other siblings thought I was spoiled rotten, which is not true. But I will admit that I was raised a little bit differently than the others. For example, I didn't have any curfew. I was never grounded. My mother never threw her shoe at me out of anger, as she was known to do with the others. My siblings would just sort of stand back and shake their heads like, how is this woman the same mother that we used to have? Being the youngest wasn't all sunshine and roses, to be honest. I mean, it did have its perks, but one of the worst things about being the youngest was, I mentioned Janice, right? She had this way of looking at me that made me feel like she was just waiting for the right moment to push me into oncoming traffic. It was exhausting being vigilant all the time. By far the worst part about being the youngest, though, was watching all my older brothers and sisters leave home one by one, off to college or to get married. By the age of 8, I found myself quite suddenly an only child. It was kind of lonely. But life teaches us that sometimes the worst thing turns out to be the best thing. And I found I had my mother to myself for those years after my siblings left. She was the one I played with. She was the one I read books with. She was the one I went on walks with. And I told her everything. Well, nearly everything. She became my best friend. So that brings me back to my story of mistaken identity. On the day in question, I was at work and my father called me in a panic. Apparently, my mother, in a fit of anger, had thrown him, my sisters, and the visiting nurse out of the house. She'd fallen just a year ago and broken her hip, and my sisters and I were taking turns helping my 90-year-old father take care of her. So my father called me and said, "You've got to go. You've just got to go to the house. You're the only one who can talk to her when she gets like this." So I stopped. I bought some flowers. I went to the childhood home where I was raised, and I tiptoed quietly into the house, and I leaned my head into the bedroom. She looked like she was sleeping, so I went in and I very carefully put the flowers on the bedstand, and her eyes popped open and she looked at me and I kind of cringed involuntarily. "Guy, don't throw me out, don't throw me out." Instead, she got this great big smile and she said, "Oh, it's you. Would you rub my feet for me?" And, now that I think about it, that was a pretty odd request, but I was just honored at the time. So, of course, I wanted to be of use and I started massaging her feet. And then out came the most beautiful stories of when she was swimming in Lake Howard and her first kiss, things I'd never heard before. But when she said, "Have I told you about my children?" that was my first clue she might not know who I was. And I said, "Well, I'm thinking to myself, I should probably confess, right, that, I'm not the nurse and I am her daughter," but it was too enticing to hear what she would say about each of us, so I decided I'd just let the charade continue. It ends up she only had glowing things to say about everyone. She called the oldest the reliable, dependable one. She called the middle child the smart one. When she got to my brother, she sort of sat up a little straighter and she sort of pulled the covers up and she said, "All these wonderful things. He's such a prince." And she said, "Well, I know I shouldn't have favorites. I don't have favorites. That would be wrong." And at that point, I kind of forgot my assumed identity. And I was just like, what? Wait, I'm not the favorite? And then my mother glared at me suspiciously. She said, why are you pretending to be my nurse? And then I couldn't come up with a very good answer, so I took off my shoe and I handed it to her. And when I pretended to cower behind the bedpost, she just let out this giant laugh, and I hadn't heard it in months. It's the most beautiful sound I ever heard. And when I think back on that conversation now, she passed away only a few days after it, I realize what a great gift it really was to find out my mother was happy with her life. She was proud of how we all turned out. And the greatest gift was learning, even though I might not be the favorite, I could always make her laugh. Thank you.